The Wyoming State Fair was in full swing on that warm August afternoon in 2024. The air carried the familiar scents of cotton candy, buttered popcorn, and hay, smells that brought comfort to James Miller, a 52-year-old rancher who had spent most of his life working with horses in the quiet corners of Wyoming's countryside. James stood tall in his weathered boots, his white Stetson hat casting a shadow over his sun-weathered face. His eyes, sharp and alert despite his age, scanned the growing crowd at the fairgrounds. He had been doing horse demonstrations at the fair for 15 years now, sharing his knowledge with eager families and curious children who rarely got to see real cowboys up close. Today was like any other day at the fair. The grounds were filling up with visitors, parents holding onto excited children's hands, teenagers in groups laughing and pointing at various attractions, and elderly couples walking arm in arm, reminiscing about fairs from years past. James's station was set up near the main arena, where his two prize quarter horses, Thunder and Storm, stood patiently in their temporary enclosure. As James prepared for his first demonstration of the day, he noticed how the morning dew still clung to the grass, making it sparkle under the strengthening sun. He adjusted the saddle on Thunder, his faithful companion of 8 years, speaking softly to the horse as he worked. "Easy there, boy. We got ourselves another busy day ahead." Sarah Martinez, his fellow rancher and the fair's security coordinator, walked by with her walkie-talkie crackling with routine updates. She waved at James, her badge gleaming on her chest. "Morning, James. Looks like we're expecting a bigger crowd today. The weather forecast is perfect." James nodded, appreciating how Sarah always kept everyone informed. They had worked together at these fairs for the past 5 years, and her presence always made things run smoother. She understood both the ranching world and the importance of keeping visitors safe. As the morning progressed, families began gathering around James's demonstration area. He had already done 2 short presentations, showing young children how to properly approach a horse, explaining the importance of gentle movements and respect for these magnificent animals. Parents took photos, and children's eyes widened with wonder as Thunder responded to James's quiet commands. Between demonstrations, James took time to chat with visitors, answering questions about ranch life and horses. He noticed a particular little girl in the crowd, probably around 6 years old, wearing a pink dress with small flower prints. Unlike the other children who bounced around excitedly, she stood still, watching everything with unusual intensity. Something about her demeanor caught his attention, though he couldn't quite explain why. The girl stayed at the edge of the crowd, clutching a small stuffed horse to her chest. Every few minutes, she would look over her shoulder, as if checking for someone. James had seen enough children at fairs to know when something wasn't quite right, and his instincts, honed by years of reading animals and people alike, told him to keep an eye on this situation. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, and the fair grew busier. The sounds of carnival rides, cheerful music, and children's laughter filled the air. Food vendors called out their specials, and the aroma of grilled corn and barbecue wafted through the grounds. Yet James found his attention repeatedly drawn to the little girl in the pink dress. Sarah passed by again, this time stopping to check on the water supply for the horses. "Everything okay, James? You seem distracted." "Just keeping an eye out," he replied, not wanting to voice his concerns without being sure. Years of ranch work had taught him to trust his instincts, but also to observe carefully before acting. As James prepared for his next demonstration, he noticed more families gathering around. The crowd had grown considerably, with people 3 rows deep now surrounding his area. The little girl had moved closer to the front, but her behavior remained the same, watchful, tense, and increasingly agitated. Little did James know that in the next few moments, this ordinary fair day would transform into something far more serious. His years of experience, quick thinking, and steady presence would be tested in ways he never expected when he arrived at the fairgrounds that morning. The events about to unfold would remind everyone present that sometimes the most important moments in life come without warning, and heroes can be found in the most unexpected places. As the midday sun beat down on the fairgrounds, James couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling growing in his chest. The little girl in the pink dress had been standing near his demonstration area for almost 2 hours now, and her behavior was becoming increasingly concerning. While other children moved around, bought snacks, and dragged their parents to different attractions, she remained rooted in place, her small body growing more tense with each passing minute. Between his demonstrations, James watched as she kept looking over her shoulder, her knuckles white from clutching her stuffed horse. Her eyes would dart through the crowd, and each time they did, she seemed to shrink further into herself. This wasn't the typical behavior of a child enjoying a day at the fair. Sarah noticed James's distraction during his third demonstration of the day. Usually, he would tell entertaining stories about life on the ranch while showing how to properly groom a horse, but today his sentences were shorter, his attention split between his presentation and the nervous child in the crowd. "Something's not right with that little one," Sarah said quietly as she passed by, proving that James wasn't the only one who had noticed. She positioned herself closer to that section of the crowd, her trained eyes scanning the area while maintaining a casual appearance. The fair had reached its peak attendance for the day. The paths between attractions were packed with people, making it harder to keep track of anyone specific. The sounds of the carousel music mixed with excited screams from the Ferris wheel, creating a chaotic symphony of fair noise. The aroma of funnel cakes and hot dogs filled the air, but the little girl showed no interest in any of the treats that made other children's eyes light up. Around 1 o'clock, James noticed a subtle but significant change in the girl's demeanor. Her previous nervous fidgeting had transformed into something more alarming. She was trembling. Her eyes were now wide with what looked like fear, and she had taken several small steps closer to the demonstration area's fence. A tall man in a dark jacket appeared at the edge of the crowd, seemingly out of place in the summer heat. James noticed how the girl's body language changed immediately when this figure appeared. She took another step forward, now practically pressing against the fence that separated the demonstration area from the spectators. Thunder, James' usually calm horse, sensed the tension and shifted uncomfortably, his ears twitching back and forth. James had learned long ago to trust his horse's instincts. Animals often picked up on things that humans missed. He patted Thunder's neck reassuringly while keeping his attention focused on the developing situation. "Ladies and gentlemen," James announced, beginning what should have been his fourth demonstration of the day. But his words were cut short as he noticed the man in the dark jacket slowly making his way through the crowd, moving deliberately toward the little girl's position. Sarah had also noticed the change in atmosphere. She moved closer to James's area, her hand resting casually on her radio. The years of working security had taught her to prepare for situations before they escalated, and something about this scene was setting off all her professional alarms. The crowd continued to mill about, unaware of the tension building in their midst. Parents took photos of their children pointing at the horses, teenagers scrolled through their phones while waiting for the next demonstration, and vendors called out their sales pitches. But in this bubble of typical fair activity, James could feel something was about to break. The little girl's breathing had become visible now, quick, shallow breaths that made her small shoulders rise and fall rapidly. Her eyes kept darting between James and the approaching figure in the crowd. The stuffed horse she had been clutching all morning dropped from her trembling hands, landing in the dust at her feet. James had seen fear before, in spooked horses, in ranch hands during dangerous situations, in children approaching a large animal for the first time. But the fear he saw in this child's eyes was different. It was deep, primal, and desperate. As he watched, he could see her gathering herself, as if making a decision that no child her age should have to make. The air seemed to grow thicker with tension, and even the usual fair noise seemed to fade into the background. Something was about to happen, and James Miller, with his decades of experience reading dangerous situations, knew that the next few moments would be crucial. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The little girl in the pink dress suddenly burst into action, ducking under the demonstration area's fence with surprising speed. Her small feet kicked up dust as she ran straight toward James, tears now streaming down her face, leaving trails on her dirt-smudged cheeks. The crowd's reaction was immediate. People stepped back, creating a small circle of space around the unfolding scene. Some parents pulled their children closer, while others pointed and whispered. The man in the dark jacket stopped his advance, hovering at the edge of the crowd, his presence becoming more noticeable in his stillness. James reacted instinctively, moving away from Thunder to intercept the running child. His years of working with spooked animals had taught him how to move calmly but quickly in crisis situations. He could hear Sarah's boots on the ground behind him, knowing she was already responding to the situation. The little girl's pink dress was now dusty and wrinkled, her blonde hair had come loose from its neat ponytail, and her face was red from crying. She ran with the desperate energy of someone escaping something terrible, her small arms outstretched toward James as she approached. Thunder and Storm, sensing the tension, moved restlessly in their enclosure. Their hooves stamped against the ground, adding a rhythmic backdrop to the chaos. Other horses in nearby areas began to whinny, picking up on the nervous energy that now filled the air. "Easy there, little one," James said softly, kneeling down to the girl's level as she reached him. His voice carried the same gentle tone he used with frightened horses, steady and reassuring. The child crashed into his arms, her small body shaking with sobs. Sarah had positioned herself between them and the crowd, her hand now firmly on her radio. She scanned the onlookers, paying particular attention to the man in the dark jacket who had begun to slowly back away from the scene. She spoke quietly into her radio, calling for additional security to the demonstration area. The fair continued around them, the Ferris wheels still turned, the carousel music played, and children laughed in the distance. But in their small corner of the fairgrounds, time seemed to stand still. The circle of onlookers had grown larger, with more people stopping to watch the scene unfold. The little girl clung to James's shirt, her fingers gripping the fabric so tightly her knuckles were white. Her whole body trembled, and her breathing came in quick, panicked gasps. James kept one hand protectively on her shoulder while using the other to signal to Sarah, indicating the retreating figure in the dark jacket. Other fair security personnel began arriving, their presence causing a ripple in the crowd as they moved into position. The man in the dark jacket was now moving more quickly, pushing his way through the gathered spectators, trying to disappear into the mass of fairgoers. Parents in the crowd had started taking out their phones, some recording the scene, others appearing to call for help. The murmur of concerned voices grew louder, mixing with the usual fair sounds to create an unsettling backdrop to the drama. James could feel the little girl's heart racing as she pressed against him, her fear palpable in every shaking breath. He had handled many crisis situations on his ranch, injured animals, dangerous weather, difficult rescues, but this was different. This was a child in terror, seeking protection from something or someone that had frightened her badly enough to make her run to a stranger for help. Thunder shifted nervously in his enclosure, reflecting the tension of the moment. The horse's behavior, usually a reliable gauge of danger, only confirmed James's instincts that this situation was serious. He maintained his calm exterior, knowing that his reaction would influence how the child responded. The next few moments would be crucial. James knew that whatever the little girl was about to tell him would change the course of this sunny fair day dramatically. He could see in her eyes that she was gathering the courage to speak, to share whatever had driven her to make this desperate run for safety. Sarah moved closer, her expression grave as she watched the man in the dark jacket disappearing into the crowd. She kept her radio ready, waiting for the right moment to act. The air was thick with tension as everyone waited for what would happen next. The moment that followed would forever be etched in James Miller's memory. The little girl, still trembling in his protective hold, lifted her tear-stained face to look directly into his eyes. Her next 5 words, spoken in a whisper that seemed to freeze the very air around them, made his blood run cold. "He's trying to take me." James felt a chill run down his spine, despite the warm summer day. His years of handling dangerous situations on the ranch had taught him to keep his exterior calm, even when his instincts were screaming danger. He maintained his gentle grip on the child's shoulders while giving Sarah a meaningful look that conveyed the urgency of the situation. Sarah immediately spoke into her radio, her voice low but firm. "Code Adam. I repeat, Code Adam at the horse demonstration area. Male suspect, dark jacket, moving toward the west exit." The response was immediate. Security personnel throughout the fairgrounds began moving with purposeful speed, their walkie-talkies crackling with coordinated responses. The crowd around them had grown larger, but people kept a respectful distance, sensing the seriousness of the situation. Parents held their children closer, and several were already on their phones, presumably calling the police. The regular sounds of the fair, the music, the laughter, the carnival barkers, seemed oddly distant now, as if the world had created a bubble around this crucial moment. James kept his voice steady as he spoke to the frightened child. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Can you tell me your name?" His words were carefully chosen, meant to both comfort and gather important information. The girl's grip on his shirt loosened slightly as she responded in a shaky voice. "Emma. Emma Patterson." Thunder and Storm remained unsettled in their enclosure, their nervous energy adding to the tense atmosphere. James had positioned himself so that his broad shoulders blocked Emma's view of the crowd, creating a safe space where she might feel more comfortable speaking. You could feel her small body still trembling, but her breathing had begun to steady. Local police officers, who had been stationed at the fair, were now arriving at the scene. They moved through the crowd with professional efficiency, their presence causing the spectators to step back further, creating a wider secure area around James and Emma. Sarah was already briefing one of the officers, her gestures indicating the direction where the suspect had fled. The man in the dark jacket was no longer visible in the crowd, but security cameras throughout the fairgrounds were now focused on finding him. Fair officials had already begun implementing emergency protocols, with staff members moving to cover all exits while trying not to cause panic among the other visitors. Emma's next words came out in broken sentences, each one making the situation clearer and more chilling. He followed me from the balloon stand, said he knew my mommy, but mommy never lets strangers take me. Never. Her voice cracked on the last word, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. James heard Sarah speaking rapidly into her radio again. Suspect description: approximately 6 feet tall, dark jacket despite the heat, baseball cap, moving towards west parking lot. Child's name is Emma Patterson. We need immediate assistance locating her parents. The fair's public address system crackled to life, but the announcement was carefully worded to avoid causing panic. Would Susan Patterson please come to the horse demonstration area? Susan Patterson to the horse demonstration area, please. Emma's head jerked up at the mention of her mother's name, hope flickering across her tear-stained face. That's my mommy's name, she whispered, her fingers finally loosening their death grip on James's shirt. Police officers were now spreading out through the fairgrounds, their movements precise and coordinated. They carried photos quickly pulled from the security cameras on their phones, showing the suspect from different angles. The fair security team had already begun reviewing footage from all the cameras, tracing the man's movements backward and forward in time. James maintained his protective position, knowing that the next few minutes would be crucial. The child had trusted him enough to run to him for safety, and he was determined to ensure that trust wasn't misplaced. He could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders as he waited for either the police to apprehend the suspect or for Emma's mother to be found. The next 10 minutes at the Wyoming State Fair became a masterclass in rapid response and quick thinking. James kept Emma close while Sarah coordinated with the police and security teams that were now spreading throughout the fairgrounds like a well-oiled machine. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, with everyone moving with purpose. 2 police officers stationed themselves near James and Emma, their presence both reassuring and strategic. Officer Martinez, a veteran of the local force, knelt down to Emma's eye level while maintaining a non-threatening distance. Her partner, Officer Chen, kept his radio close, listening to updates about the search for the suspect. Emma, Officer Martinez said gently, "Can you tell us what the man looked like? Anything special you remember about him?" Her voice was soft but professional, trained through years of handling sensitive situations with children. Still holding onto James's shirt with one hand, Emma's voice came out stronger now, her initial panic giving way to determination. "He had a big scratch on his hand," she said, demonstrating on her own small hand. "And his jacket had a rip near the pocket. He smelled like the cigarettes my Uncle Tommy used to smoke." These details sparked immediate action. Sarah relayed the new information through her radio, and the description became more specific. Suspect has a visible scratch on hand, damaged dark jacket, likely smoker. The security teams adjusted their search parameters, paying closer attention to these identifying marks. Meanwhile, the fair's security cameras had captured the suspect's movement through the grounds. The footage showed him methodically following Emma from the balloon stand, keeping a calculated distance, his behavior clearly predatory rather than coincidental. The technical team tracked his path backward, gathering crucial evidence of premeditation. James noticed Emma's breathing becoming more regular, though she still startled at sudden movements or loud noises. He had dealt with frightened horses enough to recognize the signs of fear slowly giving way to exhaustion. Thunder and Storm, his faithful horses, had also calmed somewhat, their earlier agitation lessening as the immediate tension decreased. The fair continued to operate, but with a subtle shift in atmosphere. Security personnel positioned themselves strategically throughout the grounds, their movements casual but purposeful. Families still enjoyed the rides and attractions, unaware of the intense manhunt happening in their midst. The fair management had wisely decided to maintain normal operations to avoid creating panic while increasing security at all exits. Officer Chen's radio crackled with updates. Suspect spotted near the Western Food Court, moving toward the livestock area, wearing dark jacket. Appears to be changing direction frequently. The search was closing in, the net tightening around the would-be kidnapper. Sarah maintained her position near James and Emma, her experience telling her that the suspect might attempt to return to the scene. She noticed something that others might have missed. A phone dropped near where Emma had been standing earlier. Evidence team to the horse demonstration area, she called into her radio. Possible suspect's phone found. The fair's medical team had arrived quietly, setting up nearby in case Emma needed attention. The pediatric nurse, Ms. Thompson, watched the child carefully from a distance, noting her color and breathing, ready to step in if needed but understanding the importance of not overwhelming her. James kept up a gentle stream of conversation with Emma, telling her about thunder and storm, about life on the ranch, anything to keep her mind engaged and prevent her from slipping back into panic. He noticed how she relaxed slightly when he talked about the horses, her eyes occasionally drifting to where they stood in their enclosure. The police had established a command center near the demonstration area, coordinating their efforts with fair security. They worked methodically, piecing together the suspect's movements through witness statements and security footage. The man's pattern was becoming clear. He had been circling the fair, likely looking for opportunities, before focusing on Emma. As the search continued, James could feel Emma's grip on his shirt gradually loosening. The initial shock was wearing off, but he knew from experience that this was often when children became most vulnerable to delayed reactions. He kept his voice steady and his presence solid, providing the security she desperately needed while the authorities worked to ensure her safety and locate her family. The situation at the Wyoming State Fair reached its turning point exactly 17 minutes after Emma had run to James for safety. Officer Chen's radio suddenly crackled to life with urgency. Suspect cornered at the livestock barn. Moving to intercept. All units respond. The man in the dark jacket had made a crucial mistake. In his attempt to evade capture, he had entered the livestock area, not realizing it was a dead end during fair season. The normal exits were blocked by temporary stalls and animal enclosures, leaving him trapped between rows of cattle stalls and a wall of hay bales. 3 police officers approached from different directions, their movements careful and coordinated. The suspect, realizing he was cornered, looked frantically for an escape route. His desperate search was cut short as Officer Martinez and her team closed in, their training evident in their precise movements. "Police, don't move." The command rang out clear and firm across the livestock area. The suspect froze, his hands instinctively rising as he found himself surrounded by law enforcement. The dark jacket that had made him suspicious in the summer heat now hung heavy on his shoulders, weighted down by nervous sweat. The arrest was swift and professional. As the officers secured the suspect, they found something that made their jaws tighten: a small backpack containing zip ties, duct tape, and a crude map of the fairgrounds with several areas marked, including the horse demonstration area where Emma had been watching. Sarah received the update through her radio and shared a meaningful look with James. They both understood the gravity of what had been prevented. James felt Emma's small hand tighten on his shirt again, and he gently turned her attention to Thunder, who had finally calmed enough to nuzzle curiously at the fence of his enclosure. The suspect was quickly identified through the phone found near the demonstration area and his driver's license. The discovery sent ripples of concern through the law enforcement team. He was wanted in connection with similar attempts in 3 other states. This wasn't a random incident, but part of a pattern that had finally been broken. As the police secured the scene, their security began the process of documenting everything. Photographs were taken, statements were recorded, and evidence was carefully collected. The livestock barn, usually filled with the sounds of animals and excited children, became temporarily transformed into a crime scene. The fair's head of security arrived to coordinate with the police. His face showed both relief at the suspect's capture and concern about how close they had come to a tragedy. He praised Sarah's quick thinking and James's steady handling of the situation, noting how their actions had been crucial in preventing the suspect's escape. Medical personnel gave the suspect a mandatory check before transport, revealing the scratch on his hand that Emma had noticed, a detail that would later prove crucial in connecting him to other cases. The ripped jacket pocket she had mentioned contained a receipt from a local gas station, providing investigators with a timeline of his movements before entering the fair. Officer Martinez supervised the suspect's transfer to a police vehicle, her expression professional but stern. As he was led away, the man kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with everyone. His carefully planned attempt had been undone by the quick thinking of a 6-year-old girl and the steady presence of a Wyoming rancher. Back at the demonstration area, James continued to keep Emma engaged with stories about thunder and storm, though he could see the fatigue starting to show in her small face. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the emotional toll of her ordeal was becoming visible in her drooping shoulders and tired eyes. Sarah coordinated with the fair's information desk, making sure announcements for Emma's mother continued at regular intervals. The police had already dispatched officers to search the entire fairground systematically, knowing that Emma's mother must be frantically looking for her daughter. The fair's regular activities continued around them, most visitors unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. The carousel still played its cheerful music, children still laughed on the rides, and the smell of fair food still wafted through the air. But for those involved in Emma's rescue, the day had taken on a completely different meaning. As the suspect disappeared into the police vehicle, James kept his focus on Emma, knowing that the next challenge would be reuniting her with her family. The worst was over, but there were still important moments ahead. The reunion happened exactly 38 minutes after Emma had first run to James for safety. A woman's desperate voice cut through the general fair noise. "Emma! Emma!" The sound made Emma's head snap up, her tired eyes suddenly bright with recognition and relief. Susan Patterson burst through the crowd, her face tear-stained and her clothes disheveled from searching. The moment she saw Emma, she let out a cry that carried every ounce of fear and relief a mother could feel. Emma finally released her grip on James's shirt and ran toward her mother, crying out, "Mommy!" The reunion brought tears to the eyes of many watching. Mother and daughter collided in an embrace that seemed to shut out the rest of the world. Susan Patterson fell to her knees, holding Emma so tight it seemed she'd never let go again. She covered her daughter's face with kisses, checking her for any injuries while repeatedly whispering, "My baby, my baby." Officer Martinez approached the reunited pair carefully, allowing them a moment before gently introducing herself. Susan listened in horror as the officer explained what had nearly happened, her arms tightening protectively around Emma with each detail. When she heard about James's role in the incident, she looked up at the cowboy with tear-filled eyes. "I was just getting her a balloon," Susan explained, her voice shaking. "She was right beside me, and then I turned to pay, and she was gone. I've been searching everywhere. I thought—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the possibility too terrible to voice. James stepped forward, Thunder's reins still in his hand. "Emma was very brave," he said softly. "She knew something wasn't right and she trusted her instincts. You've taught her well." His words seemed to provide some comfort to the distraught mother, who nodded gratefully through her tears. Sarah brought over a cup of water for both Emma and her mother, while the fair's medical team finally got their chance to check Emma over. The pediatric nurse, Ms. Thompson, was gentle and cheerful, making the examination feel more like a game than a medical check. The police took Susan's statement, carefully documenting the events leading up to Emma's disappearance. Her account matched perfectly with the security camera footage they had already reviewed, filling in the final pieces of the timeline. The balloon vendor confirmed Susan's story, remembering the exact moment when he had seen Emma walking away while her mother was reaching for her wallet. Thunder and Storm, who had been steady presences throughout the ordeal, seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. Thunder especially kept turning his head toward Emma and her mother, his ears forward with interest. Emma, despite her exhaustion, noticed this and managed a small smile, her first since the ordeal began. "Would you like to meet my horse?" James asked gently, seeing an opportunity to help Emma focus on something positive. With her mother's permission and keeping a protective arm around her daughter, Susan helped Emma stand up and approach Thunder's enclosure. The great horse lowered his head, letting Emma carefully pat his nose while James explained how horses can sense when people need comfort. This simple interaction seemed to help both mother and daughter begin to process the events of the day, providing a moment of peace after such chaos. Fair officials had arrived to offer their support and assistance. They provided a quiet space away from the crowds where the family could rest and speak with counselors who had been called to the scene. They'd also arranged for a police escort to take them home when they were ready. Before leaving the demonstration area, Susan turned to James, her eyes full of gratitude that words couldn't fully express. "How can we ever thank you?" she asked, her voice breaking with emotion. Emma, now securely in her mother's arms, looked at the cowboy who had protected her and gave him a tired but genuine smile. James tipped his hat, his weathered face gentle. "No thanks needed, ma'am. Emma did the hard part. She's got good instincts and a brave heart." His words carried the weight of truth. This young girl's courage and quick thinking had prevented what could have been a tragedy. The day's events had transformed what should have been a simple fair demonstration into something far more significant. As James watched Emma and her mother being escorted to their waiting police transport, he knew this was a day that would stay with him forever. The aftermath of that eventful day at the Wyoming State Fair spread far beyond the fairgrounds. By the next morning, local news stations were carrying the story of how a cowboy's steady presence and a little girl's bravery had prevented a potential tragedy. The investigation revealed even more disturbing details about the suspect. He had been involved in similar attempts in Montana, Idaho, and Utah. Emma's detailed observations, the scratch on his hand and the torn jacket, helped police connect him to these other cases. Her remarkable attention to detail, unusual for a child her age, provided crucial evidence. 1 week after the incident, the Patterson family returned to James's ranch. Emma, now recovered from her ordeal, walked confidently toward Thunder's stable, her small hand firmly held in her mother's. She carried a handmade thank you card decorated with carefully drawn horses and hearts. James had prepared something special for their visit. With Susan's permission, he gave Emma her first proper riding lesson. Thunder, seeming to understand the importance of the moment, was exceptionally gentle. The smile on Emma's face as she sat atop the horse, James leading them around the corral, showed healing in progress. The incident sparked important changes at fairs across the state. New security protocols were implemented, and James was asked to conduct training sessions for fair staff about recognizing suspicious behavior. His years of reading animal and human behavior proved valuable in teaching others what to watch for. Sarah's quick coordination with security teams became a model for event response training. The Fair Board invited her to help develop new safety guidelines, incorporating lessons learned from how the situation had been handled. Her expertise, combined with James's instincts, had created a template for protecting vulnerable visitors. The local ranching community rallied around the story. They organized free safety awareness clinics for families, teaching children how to trust their instincts and seek help from safe adults. James and Thunder became regular visitors at these events, helping children feel comfortable approaching trusted authority figures. Emma's recovery became a story of resilience. Child psychologists noted how the positive experience with James and Thunder had helped prevent long-term trauma. Instead of fearing public places, Emma developed an interest in horses and safety awareness, channeling her experience into something constructive. Susan Patterson became an advocate for child safety at public events. She shared their story at parent meetings and school assemblies, emphasizing how Emma's awareness of danger signs and quick decision-making had saved her. Her talks always included praise for the cowboy who had provided safe harbor for her daughter. The fair's response team received commendations from law enforcement for their handling of the situation. The combination of James's calm presence, Sarah's coordinated response, and the security team's quick action became a case study in effective crisis management. James continued his work at the fair, but with a new sense of purpose. His horse demonstrations now included subtle lessons about awareness and safety, delivered in his gentle, approachable style. Children were drawn to his quiet strength, just as Emma had been on that crucial day. Thunder, the steady horse who had helped calm a frightened child, became something of a local celebrity. Children would point him out at fairs and events, telling each other how he had helped save a little girl. James always took time to let them pat Thunder's nose and learn about horse behavior. 1 year after the incident, at the same Wyoming State Fair, James stood in his demonstration area, watching families enjoy the festivities. Emma and Susan made a special visit, bringing carrots for Thunder and updates about Emma's growing interest in horsemanship. The scared little girl in the pink dress had transformed into a confident young rider. The story became part of local legend, shared at community gatherings and retold to remind children about staying safe. But for James, the most important outcome was seeing Emma's continued healing and growth. Her regular visits to the ranch, where she was learning to ride and care for horses, showed how tragedy had been transformed into triumph. As James watched Emma confidently leading Thunder around the corral, he reflected on how a single moment of crisis had created lasting positive change. The Wyoming State Fair had become safer, families had become more aware, and a little girl had found strength she never knew she had. The story of the cowboy and the brave little girl became more than just a tale of rescue. It became a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in life come when we least expect them, and heroes can be found in the trust between a child, a cowboy, and a gentle horse named Thunder.